Interviewing can be a very scary, intimidating, and unnatural experience for many students at SIUE. Thankfully, the SIUE Career Development Center is here to help you navigate this process. So you have been applying for several positions and you finally received a call that you've been waiting for. An employer wants to interview you. It's important to prepare for your interview. Start by researching what others have to say about the company or the position. Glassdoor.com is a great online resource for employer reviews. Existing employees or past employees can actually rate an employer on Glassdoor.com. They can list salary information or just general reviews through star ratings on Glassdoor. Also, log on to LinkedIn. See if anyone in your networks maybe have worked in this position in the past or are currently working for that organization, and ask them maybe what they know about that organization. Ask what they like or what they don't like, maybe why they're still there or why they left their position. Also, use your resources here on campus. Ask faculties, academic advisors, maybe people or professional networks that might have some familiarity with the employer or company that you're about to interview with. Maybe they know a little bit about their interview style. Also, Glassdoor has information about interview questions that an employer might ask. It's important to research competitors because this does allow an applicant to understand the industry a little bit better. It may be a great fit for you, but the position is not exactly the industry either. So your position might be an accounting position at a great company, but that company is a packaging company that you don't know anything really about that packaging industry. So you want to make sure that you know a little bit about the position that you're applying for and also the industry that you are going to work in potentially. So start off by studying that job description that you applied for. This is the best way to make a strong connection between your experience and the experience that they're looking for. If you've been invited to an interview, obviously you have met the minimum requirements. But by studying that job description a little bit more, you are able to actually set a narrative and describe your experience that shows them that you have what it takes to be successful in that position. You can also use that job description to practice some standard interviewing questions. We do have mock interviews here in the Career Development Center, so if you do have an interview coming up, bring that job description to a career counselor so that those interview questions can be targeted for that position. Also, it's important to research whether the organization matches your values. So if something that is important to you is a company culture, utilizing your networks and LinkedIn pages and Glassdoor.com is a great way to see if that company culture would also fit your values. Develop questions to ask an employer and never ask what can be found through the website. You want to make sure that the questions that you ask to the employer are very important to you and they are something that could not be found on their website and that only could be found out through their actual employers there. So things like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Things like the company culture, what are the challenges that this position may face in the future? Things like that cannot be found on their website. Also, understand what information you do not have to disclose during the interview process. An employer is not allowed to ask you specific questions by law. So it's important to understand what you have to disclose and also what they are not legally allowed to ask you. If you do disclose something that may be important to you enough to maybe accept or decline a job offer, you can do so, but again, that is your choice. Always check the materials required before attending that job interview. So resumes, cover letter, application. If you have a portfolio or work samples, always bring those as well. Your list of references and any letters of recommendation you might want to bring as well. Understand that An employer might not ask for all of these materials, but it's never a bad idea to bring them just in case. Again, prepare with questions for the company, and make sure you bring a pen and paper to maybe jot down some notes, some follow-up questions that you might have. Maybe someone in the interview is talking and you might want to ask them a follow-up question about whatever they were discussing before. It is okay to write and jot down things quickly during that interview process. You want to make sure that all of your materials are kept in a business portfolio. These portfolios can be purchased at any office supply store or actually in our SIUE bookstore. And always prepare your interview attire. So interview attire is business professional. It is what you would wear to a career fair. It is not business casual. So always make sure that what you are wearing is clean, it's lint and wrinkle free. If you choose to wear a suit, which you should, suit pieces should match in color. They should be neutral, solid, or dark colors. And if you are wearing a dark suit, try to balance that color with a lighter color underneath. Do not wear any distracting prints or colors and stripes and patterns, as they can be a little bit distracting in the interview process. If you choose to wear a skirt, it should be knee length when standing, and then when you're sitting down, which you likely would in an interview, it should cover your thighs. I always recommend that interview attire or any professional attire should always be polished, professional, and fit properly. Your shoes. Always wear dress shoes and make sure they're clean. They don't have mud, so that you're not tracking mud through the office carpet. They should be clean and polished, and always should be closed-toed. So do not wear sandals or even dressy sandals to an interview. Other accessories or other things to mention, your belt should match your shoe color. And if you wear a tie, then it should end just above that pant line or right at the belt. Wear minimal jewelry, fragrance, and makeup, and make sure you're well-groomed. Also, cover up your tattoos for the interview process. So here are some examples of interview attire. As you can see, pantsuits, skirt suits, those are all fine to wear. So again, you want to prepare before driving out to your interview. So always check the interview location. Even if you know where that office building is, you might not know exactly where that office is located in the building. So always make sure that you know the office number if it's in a professional building. Check the parking situation. If you are required to park on the street or pay a meter, you want to make sure that you know that prior to going to that interview. That could cause you to be a little bit late. Maybe you don't have money to pay for the meter, so always check out that parking situation because it could make you feel a little bit flustered going into the interview. Make sure that you know which building entrance to go into. So if it's a large building and you enter through the wrong entrance, you could have a long walk to that interview location in the office, and again, feel a little bit flustered. Also, when you are setting up that interview, make sure you ask who you should be asking for when you arrive. And also account for traffic patterns or rush hour. You want to make sure that you have plenty of time to get there on time for your interview. So if your interview is going to be at 8 a.m., you want to make sure that you are accounting for any rush hour traffic. Always arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. You don't really want to arrive earlier than that because it can be a little bit distracting if you're just sitting out in the lobby waiting for someone to come back, and they might feel pressured to have you come back as well a little bit earlier than you had anticipated. So always just arrive a little bit early, but not too early. Remember that your interview begins the moment that you arrive onto that interview site. You do not want to be on your cell phone talking about something non-professional to a friend or your mom, or complaining about something, because you never know who you might pass while in the parking lot, or who might see you. So remember, your professional image should start right when you are on that interview site. Turn off your cell phone or keep it in the car. It can be very distracting to both you and the interview. Always approach that interview with a warm, positive feeling. So smile, make eye contact, offer a firm handshake. You want to make sure that your handshake is firm, because there's nothing worse than having a very, light handshake. It's a little bit awkward. So make sure that your handshake is firm. Always balance your calmness with enthusiasm. You don't want to be, bouncing off the walls about this interview process, but you also don't want to act like aloof, or maybe that you're not interested or overconfident about the position itself. Always take the lead from the interviewer. So if they tell you you will be going into the back part of the office, follow them. And you can accept a beverage, but water is best. There are several types of interview processes and ways to interview candidates. So there is a phone interview, and many times a phone interview is the initial interview. If you are relocating, or maybe it would be a remote position, a phone interview might be for all parts of that interview process. Also, Skype or any video interviewing. Technical interviews is where they actually interview you on your technical training and skills. Stress interviews, sometimes those are for like nursing candidates. They might test you in a stressful situation and how you would handle that stress. Group interviews. A group interview is actually when you would be interviewing side by side with other candidates. So you would be interviewing with the employer, but also other people would be interviewing for that same position at the same time. Behavioral interviews are asking about your behaviors. Tell me about a time when. Can you give me an example? So your past experiences. A panel or board interview is when you are the only candidate, but you are actually interviewing with several employees at that organization. And then obviously a mealtime interview would be an interview that involves some type of meal. So going back to those behavioral-based questions, or that behavioral type interview. So we like to call the STAR method the best way to approach these behavioral-based questions. So when answering these questions, always describe the situation or the background. So if they're asking, like, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a stressful client, you would want to give them a little bit of context and a background of that situation. Then describe the task. So what were the challenges that you faced during that stressful time or with that client? What needed to be resolved, and why did that need to be resolved? Then talk about your actions that you took to resolve that problem. So elaborate on your specific role. What did you do? What tools did you utilize? Did you utilize any resources to resolve that conflict? And then most importantly, discuss the results, the accomplishment, the recognition, savings, if you can quantify that experience or those results. Now, not every situation is going to be perfect. So we don't all have perfect examples of everything that we've done in the past or all the experiences that we've had. But as you may know, some of our most valuable experiences come from negative outcomes. So if it's not exactly the result that you were hoping for, always follow up with what you learned from that situation or what you would do in the future. So, some tips to answer any interview questions, whether they're standard questions or behavioral-based questions. Know your experiences, your resume, and your work history. I know this seems obvious because you wrote your resume, but you also don't want to be in that interview and they're asking you a question specifically about something that was written on your resume and you don't know what they're talking about. So again, remember to look at your own resume and try to reflect on the experiences that you have that are related to the position that you're applying for. Always stay calm. Take time and breathe. If you have to think a little bit about the question, that's okay. Obviously you don't want to wait a couple minutes, but you can always let them know, well, let me think about that question for a second. Take a little bit of time and then answer. I would rather you take a little bit of time and give them a solid and excellent example of your experience than rush into a question and answer and not really have a strong answer for that interviewer. Be specific when answering your questions, and always try to give examples that fit the job that you're applying for and interviewing for. So relevant information during this process is so important. Especially as a recent graduate, you might not have a lot of relevant experience, but they're looking for potential in you. So try to create relevancy or a connection to the position. If you're looking for an internship, maybe you can relate some classroom experience or technical skills that you've learned in the classroom to that position. Always be concise and be honest. You don't want to get caught up in a lie during the interview process, whether it's on your documents or during what you have said during your interview. Be honest. Again, it's just a professionalism, and you don't want to be caught in a lie or be portrayed as lacking integrity. Watch your body language, both the interviewer and yours. If you're looking at the interviewer and you're feeling like they might not understand what you're saying, or maybe you're not getting to your point right away, take those cues. But also watch your own body language. Be confident. Sit up straight. Don't slouch in the chair. Always watch your body language and give off positive body language cues. Maintain eye contact. This is just general professionalism and shows that you're interested in what they're having to say and your conversation. Ask for clarification when needed. This is important when maybe you're answering a question that you might not know exactly what they're asking, or you might not know basically the intent of the question. So always, if you don't understand the question, always ask for clarification. It's always important to answer their question. And sometimes if you initially think that you don't have an answer to their question, sometimes when they clarify their question, you might think of another way to answer that question. Stay positive and stay professional, and always show that you want this job. So when closing the interview, always avoid salary and benefits question. This is definitely an area that you'll want to ask about, but you'll want to ask about it later in the process when an offer has been extended. Again, you do want to ask questions to the employer that demonstrate your knowledge of the company, the industry, and your own career interests. You want to make sure that this position may provide room for growth to reach your career goals. Always ask the next step in the process if they do not share that with you. That's just a comfort thing for both you and them, that they have given you a timeline so that you're not waiting by your phone for a couple weeks. Maybe the position is not going to be filled for a couple months, and so you have that in mind before leaving that interview. Always thank everyone, and if possible, collect their business cards and contact information. And remember, just like the interview starts when you get onto the site, the interview also does not end until you are no longer at that interview location. So you don't want to leave that interview and get on the phone with your mom, dad, friend, and say, oh, I nailed that interview. You might be passing another candidate on your way out, or passing someone who is involved in that interviewing process. And always send thank you notes within 24 hours. I always recommend a handwritten thank you note because it shows that you are putting the time in, you are making an additional effort. An email is okay, but again, I would send a handwritten thank you note. At the Career Development Center, our career counselors are here to help you navigate that interviewing process, because we want you to go into an interview as confidently as possible. So please set up a mock interview appointment today.